Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the founder and dean of the Simon Wiesenthal Center, Rabbi Marvin Heyer and Mrs. Heyer, and the associate dean, Rabbi Cooper, it is my very great pleasure to welcome all of you here tonight for an event that is especially dear and meaningful to all of us here at the Museum of Tolerance, a screening of an amazing story, a documentary short that captures this and brings to the big screen a fascinating story that happened right here in our museum just a few short years ago. We are very proud to recognize and welcome the co-presenters of tonight's special program, the Fetzer Institute, represented by Gillian Gonda, Program Officer, Kyle Johnson, Director of Communications, and Terry Snowball, Fetzer Advisor. May I ask you please to stand and we can welcome you. The Museum of Tolerance and the Fetzer Institute have enjoyed a highly successful synergetic partnership over this past year, working together on an issue that is profoundly important to both our organizations. Fetzer, as many of you may know, champions worldwide a global initiative on gaining awareness of the power of love and forgiveness. Simon Wiesenthal, the namesake of our organization, also addressed the profoundly important and complex moral, emotional, and philosophical aspects of this issue in his famous book, The Sunflower, about the limitations and the promise of forgiveness. And Wiesenthal dedicated his entire life to the pursuit of justice, not vengeance, in the wake of the Holocaust. Today, December 10th, is the 63rd anniversary of the United Nations Human Rights Day, when senior United Nations officials are calling for greater political will and resources to implement laws and standards designed to promote and protect the rights and dignity of all people everywhere. It seems particularly fitting that we should start tonight's program by paying tribute to an outstanding statesman, human rights advocate, and example par excellence of the power of forgiveness, Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela. Speaking at Mandela's funeral in Johannesburg earlier today, President Obama called him the last great liberator of the 20th century. And people the world over are reflecting on Madiba's life and the lessons we can learn from this man: humility, strength, compassion, integrity, authenticity, courage, wisdom, hope. I witnessed some of that impact and inspiration growing up in Zimbabwe and closely attuned to the anti-apartheid struggles in South Africa. 9 years ago, on a visit to South Africa, my husband and I and our 2 youngest sons took a ferry from the majestically beautiful city of Cape Town across the bay to forsaken Robben Island, where Mandela and other political prisoners had previously been banished. Former prisoners are now the tour guides at this historic site, and it is a humbling experience listening to their riveting personal stories. I stood in the small bare cell that had confined Mandela for 27.5 years. I shuddered as the guide described the incessant degradation and humiliation to which the prisoners were subjected. I winced at the brutality of the punishment inflicted upon them. I was miserable in silent contemplation of the deprivation of basic necessities and denial of human dignity that they suffered. And I found myself asking questions. How does a man survive physically, emotionally, and spiritually from such an ordeal, let alone emerge as a charismatic leader of unparalleled ethical stature and capable of uniting a bitterly divided country through reconciliation and respect. From where does a person find the power to change himself, change other people, and change the world? Mandela and other visionary leaders were not saints or paradigms of virtue, but derived incorrigible moral fortitude from the unshakable belief that they were right. And they could achieve great outcomes because, along with their commitment to the rightness of their cause, was an equally strong commitment to the right way in which to achieve their goals, with patience, tolerance, respect, and dignity. Mandela's example is powerful. He came to understand that if he was to retain his own dignity in jail, he had to act in a dignified way. And that meant even towards his prison guards, his arch enemies, who ultimately became his greatest followers. We share Mandela's story of the guard who recognized his stature and treated him with dignity in the museum's professional development program for corrections officers, and as an educational institution charged with changing hearts and minds of our visitors, we have invoked Mandela's influence on leaders in this country and his belief in education to inspire many groups of students. More than anything, what makes the Museum of Tolerance experience unforgettable are the personal stories at the heart of everything we do. Stories that create magical moments and touch the very core of our humanity. I never cease to be amazed at the strength of the human spirit every time I listen to the Holocaust survivors in our museum, who courageously recount their eyewitness testimony without vengefulness or bitterness, but with hope and encouragement. Some stories that happen here prove that truth is stranger than fiction. One such story has been captured with sensitivity and perspicuity in a short film, Facing Fear, by Jason Cohen and his talented team. And that is what we are celebrating here tonight. Here to tell us how this remarkable project evolved, I'm honored to introduce Gillian Gonda, the Program Officer at the Fetzer Institute, and the filmmaker, Jason Cohen.
Can't see you. This is really thrilling for us here at the Fetzer Institute to be at the museum. We remember when this started several years ago, and to see where this project has evolved and to be on this stage now presenting and watching this film with you tonight is truly an honor. As Liba said, I'm Gillian Gonda. I'm a program officer working at the Fetzer Institute in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Yes, there is a Kalamazoo. And at the Fetzer Institute, we are, as Liba said, very interested in exploring, activating the power of love and forgiveness in our daily lives. We do this through research programs, through education, through media, and many more projects. We're really interested in that positive transformation of the human spirit and how that occurs. So it was our great fortune several years ago to learn about the story of Matthew and Tim through one of our advisors, Terry Snowball, who's with us here tonight. We learned about the Museum of Tolerance and their story becoming that much more poignant given the context of the work of the museum. Here at an institution and organization that really confronts visitors with the world's worst atrocities and really helps you experience and understand the impact of hate and fear. And at the same time, here at the museum, really upholding and valuing and cherishing those values that are so positive in the human spirit, such as witnessing, truth, courage, nonviolent confrontation, justice, compassion, love, and the possibility of forgiveness. Matthew and Tim's is a powerful example of this. So as Libra referenced, we were so very excited to merge together at this exploration of what is happening with Matthew and Tim. Two people coming together and sharing a story. What kind of impact is it having on an audience? Does the context make a difference? What kind of creative experiences can folks that are receiving this message experience with? Does that deepen the impact? These were the kinds of questions that we asked going into our partnership together. And at the same time, we knew that there was a really powerful story that still needed to emerge, that it needed to go to a wider and greater audience. So we were also thrilled that we were working with Jason Cohen, a very talented filmmaker, and his team, and he too saw that there was a depth that he could explore with this story with Matthew and Tim. So he came to share more of Matthew and Tim's individual and collective journey, which we'll see tonight. I have to say it's been a really remarkable year or so as this has progressed. The partnership that we've had with the museum has been beautiful. The findings from the project have not necessarily been surprising. Yes, this story does have an impact. It does change hearts and minds, and we're excited about sharing that with you more and learning from that as the project evolves. And at the same time, the film has had a wonderful journey. Premiering here in Los Angeles at the Outfest Film Festival, where it received a special audience award. Most recently screening at the prestigious International Film Festival in Amsterdam, where it was also very well received, and had a special opportunity to screen at the Anne Frank Museum, which was incredibly powerful, given the connection between the Museum of Tolerance and the Anne Frank Museum. For those of you that have not seen the exhibit yet, I was able to tour it this afternoon and highly encourage you to see it. It's very powerful. So my heart is just full of gratitude right now. I really want to thank Liba and Linda and everyone who's worked at the museum on this project, the research firm Vital Research, who's done such an amazing work for us in learning about Matthew and Tim's story and the impact it has. So thank you so much. And I really want to thank Matthew and Tim for continuing to share yourselves the way that you do. Your vulnerability and your courage to speak from the heart consistently is remarkable. So thank you both. And I want to say thanks to Jason. This is why we're here tonight, and his very talented team, a number of which I know are in the audience. So without further ado, I'll introduce Jason. We'll say a few words, and I think we'll be going back to Liba. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. It's great to have a full house here tonight. This is, as Jillian said, we've sort of been screening now since July. We've screened around the country and then most recently in Europe, and we've gotten great reaction everywhere we went. But this is sort of something we've really been looking forward to. We started talking about doing a screening here basically from the first day we started shooting here, just outside these doors. So about over a year and a half ago. So this is really nice for us to come full circle and to be able to present the film here, where it all first started. I don't want to get into too much about the film. I think we'll all watch it, and then Matthew, Tim, myself, and Liba will be up here to discuss and take some questions. I do want to thank Liba and Linda and the staff of the museum for really being so supportive throughout this whole process and sort of trusting us to come in and do this. And I also want to thank Fetzer Institute, who have been incredibly supportive of this whole project, the whole way from the inception, and we really would not be here without them. So thank you to Jillian and Kyle, who are here from the Institute, but there's a lot of people back in Kalamazoo that were also involved with this. I think I'll throw it back to Liba so we can get to the film, and then we'll be back up here with Matthew and Tim to talk further. So thanks again for everyone for coming up.
Thank you so much, Jillian and Jason. I too would like to acknowledge and thank Dr. Linda Blanchet, the Director of Program Development at the Museum. And Linda, please stand. Recognize all the staff at the Museum of Tolerance who have been intricately and invaluably involved in all the many aspects of this important project with Fetzer. And thank you also to Lorraine Seiss, to Jim Hinton, and the many staff and volunteers who are running tonight's special program. We are pleased indeed to be screening Facing Fear here for an auspicious audience. After the screening, I urge you all please to join us in a Q&A with the stars of the film, Matt and Tim and Jason, the filmmaker, and then continue the conversation over a reception in the lobby atrium. Ladies and gentlemen, the museum proudly presents Facing Fear. Congratulations, Jason Cohen, the filmmaker. Tim John. I'm sure I speak for everyone when I truly congratulate you on capturing in 23 short minutes such an intense and complicated story, but essentially extracting the most important purpose of the film, which does great credit to these two courageous gentlemen whom the museum has had the privilege and pleasure of working with. I am quite sure that you have many questions for our three important guests up on the stage tonight, and I'm going to ask that you simply raise your hand when you do have a question. We will bring a microphone to you so that everyone can hear the question, and we'll keep going that way through the audience. Let me begin, taking note of where you are. You'll get the mic in a moment, but let me begin with one question for each of you. And Jason, I'd like to start with you. What was it about this particular story, of all the other very, very important projects that you were capturing on video for short presentation, that told you that this is something that deserves its own life and must go beyond the scope of a wonderful project, but well-defined and rather limited?
Well, first of all, thank you very much. Before I answer, I just need to do one piece of housekeeping, and I need to point out a couple of people in the audience who were instrumental in the production of the film. First is the co-producer and editor, who's essentially my partner on this project. We were locked away in an editing room for close to a year. Tom Christopher, who's right in the middle of the audience here. And also, the film is beautifully shot. I'm sure if you saw that, it takes a lot of work. There's a lot that goes into that, and our amazingly talented cinematographer, Svetlana Svetko, is here, and she's hiding. She can stand up. And then lastly, I should also point out, this is a very small film, and it takes a lot of work just to kind of get noticed and get the word out. And we've had a couple of amazing people working on the film with us. David Magdell is in the front row here. And Paul Chu, who's right behind him. So, okay. So I just want to, and then if you see them out afterward in the reception, they will answer questions, and they would love to talk to you about their process in the film. Back to your question. You know, when I first read about the story, it was actually Jillian who first sort of told me about the Hate to Hope program and what they were doing with the Museum of Tolerance. And of course, when you hear the story, you're immediately struck by it. It's just a remarkable story that almost doesn't sound real. So you know, there was that just kind of draws you in. Beyond that, though, we really wanted to explore this idea of forgiveness and the process of forgiveness and how people can go through that and all the determining factors that led them to any decisions they made in that process and getting to the point where they're at. So for me, that was the challenge. That was really trying to scratch below the surface and see what Matthew and Tim were really struggling through and going through internally, and how you get to that point, and why is forgiveness possible in some places and not in others. And so our goal was to sort of capture that without, you know, we wanted to recognize the remarkable story, but then we really wanted to focus on this process that they had been going through now for 6 or 7 years. So.
And what a journey it has been. Matt, as much as we've been excited with you for where we are today, and waving goodbye as you took off for Amsterdam and going off to different film festivals, we know how much courage it takes for you to be able to tell this story. And I wonder how difficult it still is, or whether there is a sense of redemptive value in the fact that you are able to tell and retell the story and witness the impact on the audience who is listening.
It's a little bit of both. There is a redemptive quality, but the story, what we do is a living, breathing presentation. We did say earlier that it changes as we change. New things come up, new elements of the story that Tim remembers, he shares with me, and then we then share in a presentation, and some of them are painful. One thing I want to point out that Jason was able to capture is that, and I'm sure that you've been in the museum for years prior to this film and this project, I had never once ever spoke about my mom in the way that I did in the film. And that is something that is new. I kept things hidden because they were too painful to talk about. But having Jason pull that out, because he kept sitting there saying, there's more to this, there's more to this, there's more to this. And you see me almost lose it. And I had to go through the process of forgiveness again in order to forgive my mom, who, it's not clear in the film, is no longer with us. We were unable to ever speak again, and to do that alone. So it is a very ongoing journey as these new things come up. So it's both redemptive, and then it's also can be painful, because Tim and I do try to keep it fresh and not scripted and not run of the mill.
Tim, you talk a lot about the process. I wonder what it is that you are struggling most with at this point in the journey.
Well, it's sort of difficult, because every time we do the presentation, or every time we show the film or whatever, as Matthew said, we have to go back. And there's that question, have you forgiven yourself? And it just depends upon the day. And depending on the day, depends, it's organic, very organic, the way that we do presentation and the way that we interact with the audience. For example, usually I tell people, some days it's a good day, some days it's a bad day. Today's a bad day, by the way. And I've never said that in front of an audience before. But the good thing is that this is the first time that I've actually had family members show up at one of our presentations. I'm not going to point them out or anything, because I don't want to embarrass them. But that shows growth there as well. And, it's wonderful. But, I didn't want to come here today because there's stuff going on. Everybody has things going on in their life. And but I did. And after this is done, I'll take a breath and I'll go on, and tomorrow will be another day.
And we do want to offer a very warm welcome to all the members of Matt's family and Tim's family who are here today, and know that they are part of an extended family that has embraced them and cares for them very, very much. Let us go to the first question in the audience, and the gentleman is holding the mic.
Thank you. This is a question for both Matt and Tim. If you were today to meet, if you had the chance of meeting a 10-year-old kid that is undergoing the same environment, it's basically a version of you in the past, and you had the opportunity to speak to them one-on-one, and Matthew would be, this boy who's being heavily bullied and who, is not being accepted in his family, and his mom is obviously not supporting him in any way. In the case of you, Tim, it would be a kid who had recently lost his brother in the hands of an African American, and all this rage is starting to build up, and you see that you're having trouble controlling it, and it's just going to spit out at some time. If you had the chance of speaking to these kids one-on-one, what would you tell them?
Thank you. Please pass back the mic.
Fortunately, we do have that opportunity. We are able to talk to kids 10, 11, 12, 13 here in the museum, and elsewhere we go, which was part of the FEDSA project, was to include those kids. They do not necessarily openly ask in the audience, but they will come up to me, and they do tell me these stories. And I had a girl in the 7th grade, she was 12 years old, whose brother had been thrown out because his mom could not accept his sexuality because of her religion. Very exact same story. She was not allowed to contact her brother. And she said, what would I say to him if I did? And I said, first of all, you'll find a way to contact him and let him know that you love him. And to the kid, I always say the same thing. If you know it's an unsafe, I didn't know it was unsafe to tell my mom. But if we know and we're aware that those things exist, we find a different safe haven of friends that become our extended family who can support us. I always will say this, I don't believe that anybody should deny who they are. You find strength in standing up and using your voice to say, this is who I am. But sometimes you have to do that, maybe not in your family at that moment, at the age of 10. But it does happen, and I see it all the time. And I do let them know the resources that are out there that I didn't know were out there. I didn't know those resources were out there when I was on those streets. But they're out there now, and I make sure that they know that information and they have a way of getting it. And I also, because they're usually here with a teacher, and the teacher's the one sitting there putting their arm around them, I'm like, and that's your friend right there. And that's your go-to. So that's usually the advice I give them.
If I were to talk to, well, first of all, I have to make it clear, it's not clear in the movie, but my brother did survive. He still has a bullet in him. It's very ironic, though, that my brother, being the one who was shot by an African American, has no ounce of racism in him at all, and is a very kind and gentle person. And when I was a young person, was the most influential person who, you know, on several occasions would pull me to the side and say, what are you doing? You know, what are you doing? And if I were to, I didn't listen, obviously, because by that time I had already put up that wall, and I often say that you can't shake the hate out of anybody, but what you can do is you can be a positive role model. I think everybody has to have their path. You cannot force somebody not to do something unless you lock them away. And sometimes it has to be done too, unfortunately. But if I were to actually meet myself, I would probably slap myself across the face and say, wake up! Even though I know it's not going to work. But, you know, that's what we do.
Next question, please.
This question is for Tim. Tim, in the movie you mentioned that the rage or the hate, it was sort of like a feeling that a drug would produce, and you were coming down from your intolerance buzz, so to speak. And you also mentioned that there was an epiphany that you had. And I was wondering if there was anything that precipitated the epiphany or an event or a series of events in your life.
A lot of people think that this sort of lifestyle, whether it be gangs, whether it be, you know, radical jihadism, whatever the case may be, a violent background or an extremist background, a lot of people think that it's just like one day we wake up and everything's different, and it just doesn't happen like that. It was about a 3 to 5 year process for me. But I do think my age had a lot to do with it. I think the fact that I was a father, you know, I was in my late 30s, or late 20s, early 30s. I had a 2.5-year-old kid, and he actually said in the grocery store one day, he used the N-word in the grocery store. Most people would say, wow, what am I doing to my kid? I did, to a certain degree, but there was still a payoff involved. Because I had that identity. My entire identity was the white racialist, ideology, and I had that respect, which was something that I didn't feel. You know, my perception was that I wasn't getting that at home or in my own life, in other places. But it was definitely my child, and it still is my child. And you know, he's a very big child. He's 6'6", almost 300 pounds. Charlie's my big baby boy. But there's been some negative things that have happened, negative influences and things like that. And if I could change all that stuff, I would. But I can't. But yeah, I wasn't struck by lightning one day or anything like that. It's a very long process, and other people would probably tell you the same thing.
Please raise your hands if you would like the mic. We have several questions. There's one in the middle, and the mic is on its way to you, sir. Please pass it along. Thank you kindly.
This could be for any one of you. Do you think any acts are unforgivable? You know, people say that I was able to forgive Tim and the whole incident. Yes, there is something I struggle with on, is there anything that's unforgivable, and it's crimes against children. When perpetrators take the lives or destroy the lives of innocent children, I get so emotional. I cannot fathom even forgiving them. And I don't know where that comes from, but it's something I can't watch news stories about it. There was one just this morning, a little boy was killed sitting in the backseat of his car. And he was 6 years old, and he was innocent, and they shot him multiple times. I can't forgive the perpetrators of that. I just can't. And I'm maybe one day I'll be able to, but right now I can't.
Yep. My answer to that is, after working on this film, I think, a lot of people have asked me if I would be able to forgive if I was in Matthew's shoes. And I pretty much said across the board, I honestly have no idea. And I think it really depends on the situation and your background and all the societal factors, everything that is involved that weighed into, and that's what we were trying to examine with the film a little bit, is that, there's just so much that goes into it, and forgiveness is not a cut and dry thing. I think it's important to note, and particularly we're sitting here at the Wiesenthal Center. This was started as a Holocaust museum. When you talk about Nazis and Holocaust survivors, I would never look to a Holocaust survivor and say you should be forgiving Nazis or Nazi if you met them for what happened. And I think Lebo can chorus on this, but I don't think Wiesenthal was necessarily a proponent of just forgiving the Nazis. So it's just, I just think it's tough. And that was part of the reason why we made the film, is that we want you to then go back and think about it. We're not trying to tell you that it's the right answer or the wrong answer, but if you can take it back and see how it plays into your own life, even if it's a small quarrel or dispute with somebody, up to, obviously something more drastic. I have no idea if I was in their situation. Matthew talks about children. I'm a parent. If something happened to, one of my kids, I have no idea how I would react or how I would be able to react as far as that goes. So hopefully that answers it.
And for me, at the very beginning of the film, it says, I don't know if I would be able to forgive in this particular case. But other situations, I don't know. It's something, as Jason was saying, it depends on the situation. I too have an issue with, people who, victimize young people. And it's sad, and we need to do something about it.
I did allude in the beginning that Wiesenthal's take on this does emphasize the complexities of the struggle and all of the different dimensions. It's very different if you are forgiving someone who's done something directly to you, and it is your right to do so. How do you forgive someone for doing, who are you to forgive someone for the crimes that they've perpetrated against others? And on the other hand, Wiesenthal did not believe in collective guilt, and on visiting the blame of parents on their children. It's an extremely complex issue, and in some ways, it's a remarkable gift when both the perpetrator and the victim can find that courage to confront each other face to face and work through, and only you and you alone have the right to decide what can be forgiven and what not. And forgetting is another dimension. We need to move on, but we never forget. Who has the microphone? Please. Go ahead and articulate the question, and I'll repeat it.
First of all, I really, before
my mind is all the people I have to forgive. So the question is that when somebody does something, you know, and they ask for the forgiveness, there's also this thing about trusting them again. You can feel, well, I can forgive them, but then it's almost instinctive sometimes to think, well, I'm just going to hang on to that and not really trust them because they could do it again. So how long did that take? How did trust play a role in all of this?
First, to be clear, which is amazing, I don't know if it's clear in the film, Tim never asked me to forgive him. That was a personal journey that I went on. And actually it was simultaneously, because it took a couple of years. It wasn't like, okay, we're good, we're in our 40s, that happened when we were teenagers. The process took a couple of years, and it's never complete, it's ongoing. But the trust grew as forgiveness moved forward. Because Tim had such courage and strength, not to just sit and have a conversation about what we'd be talking to students about, but to share details of what happened in that alley, what happened before that alley, what happened after that alley, how many people were in the alley, whose boot was it that left that scar on my forehead. So as he's sharing this, I'm seeing this person. And my trust in him grew because he had such courage to sit there and tell. He could have walked away. He could have said, I'm not going to share this. It happened. That's what happened. Whatever you remembered is what you remembered. But he didn't. And so my trust in him grew as he shared each and every detail and each and every story. And as we sat together on the stages, as you heard, in the very, very beginning, I wasn't comfortable sharing something that was private. And it was also because it was not comfortable, really. It was the trust. It was like, who am I sitting with? What are we talking about? But all of it happened simultaneously together, which is a great thing. I just never knew that was what was going to happen.
Let's move on to the next question. Who has the mic?
Hi, this question is for Tim. I just want to know, do you still keep up with the 13 or 14 other people with you that night, or do you know? Have they reached out?
Not at all.
Or
that was a long time ago. There's a couple people who I know were there, both of which who didn't take part. There was another person who was there who actually knocked my front teeth out. And we used to see each other from time to time afterwards. But most of the people who were there, and we knew who each other were, we would look at each other from across the room or something like that and totally avoid one another. It was a deep, dark secret. I will, though, state that there was a young lady with us who had a profound effect on me in that during the attack she kept on screaming, "You guys are messed up." Usually, that's not exactly what she said, but "You guys are messed up, I think you're killing him," this sort of thing. And she continued to do so on the way home, and I could still hear her voice today. And later on in life, when I went, because when this act of violence first took place, I was not involved with organized hate groups. I was a punk rocker. I was a Nazi punk. I was 17 years old. I was a little kid, basically. Big little kid. But it wasn't until my late teens, early 20s that I started to get involved with organized hate groups, and I could still hear her voice when I was involved with acts of violence that could have gone, and I've been involved with hate crimes, been charged with hate crimes and things like that. That could have gone a lot further. And I think that little siren, that internal siren she left behind in my memory, stopped me from, committing worse acts of hatred, actually.
Questions from the back of the auditorium.
Yes, this is for Matt. You said that you started the process of forgiving after you met, I guess, Matt, right? Tim, I'm sorry. After you met Tim. So, what would have happened if you never met him? That's the first question. And the second question, and it is really for both of you, is you keep talking about the process of forgiving, But can you talk a little bit about the process itself? Like, what other emotion did you feel during those 2 or 3 years that it took you to forgive?
Can I ask the first question?
The first
You
is,
didn't, the two
Okay,
didn't.
sorry. It's what happens when you ask an ADD software 2 questions in a row. They forget the first one because they're answering the second one in their head. If I never met Tim, I don't know that I would have necessarily reached. Really, what it was going through the process of forgiving him is what enabled me to help forgive my mom. So I don't know that if I didn't meet him, if that would have happened. Because when my mom passed away, it was very devastating to me that I never was able to have a conversation with her. But that's kind of where it got left. I didn't really think beyond that grief about forgiving my mom. There was, and you ask about the emotions, which they're kind of tied together. That it's hard to explain the process of forgiveness because for each person it's an individual journey and how they choose to do it. Mine was through writing, mine was through reflection, and also something else was that hopefully you'll understand is there's the pain, there's the anger, there's all those emotions that you relive, but there's another bigger emotion, and that is grief. And it's not the grief over my mom's death, it's the grief of letting go. Because this moment had defined my life for so long. And even though I knew it would be a good thing, letting it go was a scary thought. Because it was such a part of my life. So I had to grieve the loss of that whatever that was inside me that was hanging on to that incident. And those are just some of the things, but each individual person sitting here will have a different way of approaching forgiveness and walking through those steps. Some are through writing, some are through meditation, through therapy, whatever it is. There's no one good set of rules, and I can't write steps out and say this is how you have to do it. It's up to you.
Yeah, kind of the same, pretty much. Being attached to a negative emotion is hard to do, and it is sort of a mourning process. But there did become a time when, as I said earlier, today was a bad day, yesterday was a good day, tomorrow might be a worse day. I don't know. When it happens, all I do is deal with each day at a time. If I look too far in the future, I'm lost. If I look too far in the past, I'm damned. So how you deal with that? And the way that I deal with that is just today, right now. I'm not worried about anything else. That's all I can deal with at this time. But I did do some therapy, and of course the meditation helps. And I do belong to support groups and things like that. And I think everybody should have some sort of a support system, whether it be family, whether it be church, whatever the case may be. Synagogue, it doesn't matter. It's helped me through.
Whoever has the mic, please, and we have some more questions. We'll get you the mic momentarily. Go ahead, please.
Tim, my question is for you. It's about how you came to the point where you did, when you were angry, and then so angry, and the hatred that built in you. Was this something that your family background was instilled in you, or how did you get involved with this group? There's got to be a beginning of how you started into where you started and where you ended up.
Right, and most people would. That's the first thing they say. It's got to be the family. Got to be the family. I have 2 sisters and an older brother, all of which had a different upbringing than me. They grew up in a multicultural sort of situation, different town, everything, and I grew up in a totally different background. As it said in the movie, my brother being shot by an African American, I think, is the number one incident. And it was a traumatic incident. And most people who get involved with organized hate groups or whatever the case may be, I know, again, I'm going to talk, this is across the board. It doesn't have to be white racism. It doesn't have to be, it could be a gay man, who doesn't like heterosexuals. You could add this to any scenario. It's a negative experience relating to somebody or a group of people from a different ethnicity. In my particular case, it happened to be my brother was shot by an African American. It didn't happen to me personally, which I think it is important to understand, because had it happened to me personally, it might have been totally different. The fact that my brother was able to forgive is, I don't know how to be able to do that. But my family was not burning crosses or anything like that. But I'm not going to lie, there was sort of an undercurrent of classism in the beginning. The neighborhood that we lived in was all, American Pie and that sort of thing. And there was a change. And my perception, my skewed perception is what led to that. Yes, there was people who tried to steer me clear or guide me in a different direction, but by the time I got to that level, you didn't tell me anything. From the time I was, 12, 13 years old till my early 30s, you could not tell me anything. I knew everything there was to know. And if you did, there was people, like I said, like my brother who tried to approach me. There was also several people in law enforcement who tried to approach me. But by that time, I had built up this wall, and I was not ready. What brought me to my knees was fatherhood and fear and anger. All the things that got me into it actually got me out of it as well, which is sort of ironic. A lot of us are led to believe that if you're part of these types of groups, it's blood in, blood out. You get jumped in, you get jumped out. I haven't had that experience personally, but there are others who have. One of the main reasons I was able to get out was I took myself out of a skewed perception and the type of people that I was hanging out with. We were very isolated. We isolated ourselves on purpose. And once I stepped out of that realm and started to see the world as it really was on my own, without any distractions or influence from others, I started to see things in a different light. I started to see people as individuals rather than this is a black person, this is a Hispanic person, this is an Asian person, this is an Anglo-white person or whatever. And I was exposed to different cultures. And in a different way to where I was treated with respect. Most of my life I was led to believe that certain people live a certain way. And I realized that it was a lie. And at the same time I would come home to a situation where my son and my son's biological mother were still living in this racial bubble, this fantasy world, delusional mindset, and I saw the contrast between the two worlds very clearly. Whereas prior to that, I didn't. There was more of a gray area, and now there was no gray area anymore. It's very difficult for people to understand sometimes, but I don't believe that there's anything exclusive about being involved with a white racialist group. You could attach the same sort of mindset to a lot of different lifestyles.
I just want to say to the filmmaker, I think it's a very interesting subject, and that you got this in 23 minutes, that you evoked such a feeling is really kudos to you. It is much more interesting than when I thought I'm coming to hear 23 minutes short on forgiveness. I thought, well, this will be fascinating to see how this goes down. What I find really fascinating about the piece is I don't know for myself spiritually if I could transcend to that point where I could forgive someone for doing this kind of thing. I hope that I could. But you go so far as to move forward from just the forgiveness to where in the film you said, he's like family now. And I wonder, is it possible that because your experience as a child with your mother was so intense, and your loss of your family member, that you both came from extreme, intense experiences earlier in life, and that was able on some level to make you come together even in this most unbelievable set of circumstances, that you go from forgiveness to family, when I think some people would say, I forgive you, see you later, chap. And you tend to have made family. Can you speak to that aspect, how you have managed to become closer to one another?
Yes, I know I got a little bit beyond, but I'm dramatic. The intensity that you speak of, my mom passed on to my brothers, with the exception of one. I come from a large family. There's 7 kids in the family. I only speak to one of my brothers. My other brothers, through their religion, spew their intolerant views of my sexuality. So when you are with somebody, for the number of years I was with someone who was terminally ill, and I'm on a ranch, 20 acres, secluded in Northern California, and I'm alone. There's a couple of moments in my life where Tim had come out of the woodwork and was very close. There was never any intent to grow and be friends, and it was more of what you said. It was going to be like, okay, we'll get through this. We're co-presenters. We work together. I'm good with that. The friendship came as there was moments in my life that were very painful, and there was no one for me to reach out to. I just felt so desperately alone. And those moments came it wasn't like I pick up the phone and I called Tim. It's that we were working and traveling together. And so on those trips and traveling and working together, I would tell him what was going on. He initiated phone calls. He would call, how are you doing? How is Mike? And I would share with him, and he was one of the only people that would fly to that ranch on a number of occasions to be there, so that I could feel connected and feel like I'm going to be okay. So our friendship and the familiar thing, you're right, we both have a lot in common prior to the incident, after the incident. Okay, so just to give you one thing, both our nephews are here tonight. Both our nephews are here tonight. So there's a lot of things that have ever happened. They're not coincidences, but there was never a plan, I guess is what I'm trying to say. There was never a design of what would happen in the friendship and this, and then now I do consider him as, that familial friend, someone I can rely on, someone I can trust. And as I said in the film, it's very odd because this is someone who was willing to kill me.
The question actually began as a question for the filmmaker, and I'm wondering, Jason, if this is the more that you were pushing for.
Yeah, I mean, Matthew, I think said earlier that it sounded like I interrogated you, which I hope that's not how it felt. We had a very cordial 4-hour conversation on camera, and then another one for another few hours somewhere down the line. But yeah, I mean, I think it certainly was part of it. I mean, I think for both of them, they really bared themselves on camera. I mean, there's a reason why I'm a filmmaker and I'm not on the other side of the camera, because I don't think I could do what they did, and we're hiding back there behind the lights and everything, and it's easy for us. Matthew's talked about it, and he's talked a little bit, but I think when we got around to talking about his mom again, and I don't even, to be honest, totally remember if it was exactly how it came back around. I think it was something that sort of came as a revelation for Matthew, and I was happy about that. I mean, it was tough for him. It was tough for all of us, but I think in the end, I was happy that he was able to kind of shed that a little bit and talk about it. It's not easy to do that on camera, and now it's not easy to do it. We had no idea when we made this film that it was going to be seen outside of a pretty small audience, and now it's been out and about the world, and we'll see what happens from here. But and similarly, I think Tim as well, and particularly in talking about forgiving himself, and being honest about it and owning up to his past, which is tough, which a lot of us don't do, and we all have things in our closet and we probably don't address. So yeah, I think all of that was when I went in, we went in to make a film about their story and examine this process, and I just did hope that we would get some more insight into it, and I think all of that just lent more to it, and we all of us in this room got more insight out of that because they were able to open up as much as they did.
There were also insights into the different places where Matt and Tim have spoken, and I just want to mention a couple. You saw them speak in the museum, of course, to groups, and they've done that hundreds and hundreds of times to many, many thousands of different audiences, lots of young people, lots of members of the public, teachers, professional groups, our law enforcement who come here to programs. You also saw them in Judge Wesley's courtroom in the Los Angeles Superior Court, and Judge Wesley's here tonight. That is part of our partnership with the Los Angeles Superior Court, probation and others, on a program called Shades, empowering young people to become jurors and adjudicate instances of hate on their own school campuses. There are also members of our audience tonight here, I believe, who are the Los Angeles County Sheriffs and officers who developed the Share Tolerance program, and they helped us take Matt and Tim into Men's Central Jail. And the impact of their story there on inmates is profound and incredible. In the lobby you have some pieces of artwork that are associated with the extensive FETSA project on which we partnered, in which the audience was able to then reflect their reactions to the presentation through some artistic expression. I'd like to ask of Matt and Tim, of all the many audiences to whom you have spoken, not all of them, I'm sure, are accepting of the story and laudatory of the process. Do you ever feel that they are still judging you and that they don't believe you?
Yes, and it's made quite apparent sometimes. It's not the entire audience, but there are members of the audience that do have that still. They're not going to budge. I will say, for the most part, by the end of what we do, I see them questioning, but I don't know the result. What are they questioning? What are they asking themselves? But there's some that have been, in the early part of this, were vocal. In the later years, I don't think I've had a negative experience. It's all been positive.
For me, I mean, here I am, bald head, goatee, tattoos, depending on how I dress too, even out on the street or whatever, there's always going to be, and I'm sure there's skeptics in here. It's just life, it's just the way people are. As it also said in the film, unless you know me, you don't know. I could be up here making this whole thing up. For some people might think that way. That's fine. That's okay. That's not what this is about. This is to plant a seed and to get people to think. And if we can get people to think, that's my main goal. And regarding some of the groups that we have spoken for, young people have been, a lot of the things that have come out because of questions from young people is what first led me on my journey of, have I forgiven myself? But one of the most profound experiences that I've had was in the Men's Central Jail, when you have all these big burly guys and they're mixed together, which is something that they don't usually do in prison. They self-segregate, and having somebody just in front of their fellow inmates just breaking down and just crying. It's profound. It's the most profound experience I've ever had, and that is pure, raw emotion, and not enough of us deal with that stuff. And so that has thus far been the most profound experience I've had.
You certainly provoked a lot of thinking and questions from the audience. I'm going to take the last one before we extend the invitation in the atrium. At the back, please.
So you guys have been on this journey and you continue on the journey, as you say, it changes daily. What are the two characteristics that you admire most in each other? Characteristics or traits? What do you admire most with each other?
Never been asked that question. Okay. I think I alluded to one of the things about Tim is his courage and his strength to be so honest and so open. And to have the strength to sit next to this guy, even in the beginning, and allow me to take the audience and him back to one of the most horrific nights in both our lives. And then to bring that story forward to this incredibly strong, courageous person. So one, I guess, would be the courage and the strength. And the second characteristic is that he's always there. Even if he doesn't want to listen, he will. But he's always there when I need counsel. So those two things are happening.
I'd have to reciprocate some of that. You know, one of the things that Matthew did say that about the listening thing, we have a weird relationship. I mean, we're not walking down the boulevard skipping or anything, obviously, but we do utilize one another when we need to, and when we're at our worst or at our best, whatever you want to call it. You know, I've called Matthew up when I'm just having a horrible time, and he reminds me of things. And there are certain things that both of us sort of live by or whatever, and we remind each other. And for him to be able to stand next to me for as many years as he has, and listened to me go on and on and on and on and on about things. He has patience. He's a very good leader as well. And he's my buddy. I mean, he's just my buddy. And I hope those are positive things. We've now seen this film screened in front of audiences around the country and different parts of the world. What is the audience reaction, and what are your hopes for this film? There's nothing like film to bring a story like this to the greatest possible audience and before the largest number of people. How are people reacting? Where do you see this going?
Well, we've certainly gotten an overwhelmingly positive response to the film, whether it's people that are just struck by the story or people that are struck by the process of forgiveness and taking away from that. And to be honest, we have had people who have stood up and said, "I don't believe it. I'm not buying it." And my response to that is, great. We're not here to sell it. We're here for you to see this story and take it in, and then go do with it what you will. So, I think in the end, as we've talked about it with the museum, there's an educational aspect to this film, and in the long run, that's what we plan to do, is go out. We've done some test screenings at schools that have gone really well, partially because it's a 23-minute film, and juniors and seniors in high school don't seem to want to watch much longer than that. So we found that that's actually working to our advantage. Teachers like it because it's 23 minutes, and then we can have a nice, robust discussion right afterwards. And they can get their lesson plan in an hour. So we do plan to go out with it. In that sense, we've had other institutions that have been seeking us out, universities and high schools. So I think in the long run, that's what we'd like, where we'd really like to see the film. And then we just wanted to get out to as many people as possible. I'll just say, just real quickly, on that note, if you haven't gone to the website, is very easy to remember. It's facingfearmovie.com. There's postcards all outside when you walk out. It's got the website on there. We have a Facebook page and a Twitter, and you can follow us and spread the word, and we'll hopefully be having more screenings coming up, and then we are figuring out distribution. So the film will be available online or video on demand, and we're looking for a broadcast of the film as well, which we're hoping is all going to start happening around the spring.
Well, we certainly wish it continued success. One last note. Before there was a film, there was a book, Freaks and Revelations, and we have copies of the book for sale in the bookstore on the lobby level. After you've enjoyed the reception, please feel free to pick up a copy. And if you will indulge us for 1 second, I know how hard it was for Matt and Tim to rally to the call of the museum in suggesting that perhaps they would like to share their story with our audiences so that others could benefit and learn from the story that each of them really came to the museum to tell. We admire and respect them for it. We're enormously appreciative of the courage that they show each time that they do. And we would like to give them just a small token of our appreciation, a memento that they can enjoy and keep. And this tonight felt like the appropriate place to do so. So please help applaud Matt and Tim for the museum.